Part-2. The political gladiator, the war for the soul of America, did not end at Appomattox. For Robert Smalls, the smoke of the battlefield merely cleared to reveal a new kind of war, one fought with ballots, legislation, and the constant threat of an assassin's bullet. In 1868, the South was a fever dream of hope and rage. The Reconstruction Acts had passed, giving black men the right to vote and hold office. Robert Smalls, now the owner of his former master's mansion, didn't just want to be a citizen, he wanted to be a builder of the new world. He stood on the stump in the town square of Beaufort. The crowd was a sea of formerly enslaved people, their eyes wide with a mix of terror and disbelief. "They told us we were property," Robert's voice thundered, echoing off the brick walls of the old slave market. "They told us we were children who couldn't understand the law. But I ask you, who steered the planter, who navigated the shoals while the masters slept? We did, and we shall navigate this state into the light." He was elected to the South Carolina House of Representatives, and later the state Senate. He wasn't just a symbol, he was a tactician. He knew that freedom without education was a house without a foundation. He authored the legislation that created the first free public school system in the United States. Not just for black children, but for the poor white children who had also been left in the dark by the planter elite. But the old guard was not going quietly. A shadow was falling over the South. The Red Shirts and the Ku Klux Klan. These were paramilitary groups composed of former Confederate soldiers determined to redeem the South through blood. One humid evening in 1876, Robert was traveling to a political rally in Edgefield. As his carriage rounded a bend, the path was blocked by 20 men on horseback, draped in white sheets, their faces hidden behind jagged eye holes. The leader stepped forward, a torch casting a hellish glow on his pistol. "Smalls," the man hissed, "you've forgotten your place. You think that suit makes you a man. It only makes you a bigger target." Robert didn't flinch. He reached into his coat, not for a gun, but for his pocket watch, the one gifted to him for his naval service. He looked the man in the eye. "I have faced the cannons of Fort Sumter while you were hiding in the brush," Robert said, his voice cold as iron. "If you kill me, you make me a martyr. If I live, I make you a citizen. Which do you prefer?" The tension was a physical cord ready to snap. For a moment, it seemed the history of South Carolina would end in that clearing. But the sheer, immovable gravity of Small's courage forced the riders to part. He drove through the center of them, his head held high. In 1875, Robert Smalls took his seat in the United States House of Representatives. Washington, D.C. was a city of giants. He walked the halls alongside men like James G. Blaine and Frederick Douglass. To the white Northern politicians, he was a curiosity. To the Southern Democrats, he was an abomination. On his first day, a congressman from Georgia refused to sit near him. Robert simply moved his chair closer. "I am here to represent the 4th District of South Carolina," Smalls declared from the floor of the House. "But I am also here to represent the idea that a man is limited only by his character, not the pigment of his skin." He fought for the Civil Rights Act of 1875, a law that would have banned segregation in public places nearly a century before the 1960s. He spoke with the precision of a navigator. He knew every loophole, every parliamentary trick. He was so effective that his enemies began a campaign of character assassination, accusing him of taking a $5,000 bribe years earlier in South Carolina, a charge that was later proven to be a political setup. The year 1877 brought the compromise. In a backroom deal to settle the disputed presidential election, the North agreed to withdraw federal troops from the South. For Robert Smalls, this was the ultimate betrayal. He watched from the windows of the Capitol as the soldiers, the only thing protecting black voters from certain slaughter, packed their bags. "You are leaving us to the wolves," he warned his Republican colleagues. The redemption began. Across the South, black officials were dragged from their homes. Voting booths were burned. The Jim Crow era was being born in the fires of white supremacy. Yet, while other black leaders fled to the north, or went into hiding, Robert Smalls did the unthinkable. He went back home. Back in Beaufort, Robert became the king of the Sea Islands. He used his personal fortune and his remaining political influence to protect his community. He bought land and sold it back to former slaves at cost. He built a dock, a store, and a newspaper. He was the collector of customs for the port of Beaufort, a high-ranking federal position he held under 5 different presidents. He became an island of stability in a sea of rising oppression. One afternoon, a young man asked him, "Captain, why do you stay? The laws are changing against us. The world is turning dark again." Robert Smalls looked out at the Charleston harbor, the same water he had crossed in the Planter 40 years earlier. "The tide goes out," Robert said, his eyes reflecting the blue of the Atlantic, "and when it does, the mud and the rot are exposed. But the tide always comes back in. I am just staying here to make sure the lighthouse stays lit for when it does." While the ruins of Charleston were still smoldering, Robert Smalls understood that physical freedom was a hollow victory without the power of the law. In 1868, he was elected to the South Carolina Constitutional Convention. He walked into the hall not as a guest, but as a lawmaker. He sat among men who had once owned people like him. The air was thick with resentment. Smalls didn't care. He focused on a single, radical goal: universal education. If a man cannot read the ballot in his hand, Smalls argued before the assembly, he is still a slave to the man who tells him what it says. Against all odds, he successfully pushed through a mandate for a state-funded public school system. It was the first of its kind in the South. For the first time in American history, the children of the enslaved and the children of the masters sat in classrooms supported by the same tax dollars